Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. For over 4,500 years, it has stood as a silent sentinel on the desert plateau, a mountain of stone built with a precision that baffles modern engineers. It is the last of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing, a tomb, a monument, and an enigma that has captivated humanity for millennia. How did a civilization without modern technology construct something so vast, so perfect? What secrets are still hidden within its labyrinthine passages and sealed chambers? Join us as we journey back in time to uncover the story of the Great Pyramid of Giza, a testament to human ambition, ingenuity, and the quest for eternity. Before the eternal mountains of Giza pierced the sky, there was an idea, an evolution of belief and architecture that transformed the very landscape of Egypt. For centuries, the final resting places of kings were mastabas, single-story rectangular structures of mud brick built over an underground burial chamber. They were impressive, certainly, but bound to the earth. The revolution began in the 27th century BC, during the Third Dynasty, with a pharaoh named Djoser and his visionary vizier, a man so brilliant he would later be deified, Imhotep. Imhotep conceived of something entirely new. Instead of a single mastaba, he imagined stacking them, one on top of the other, each level smaller than the last, creating a stairway to the heavens. The result at the necropolis of Saqqara was the step pyramid. For the first time, stone was used as the principal building material on a massive scale, a technological leap that required unprecedented organization in quarrying, transportation, and construction. The step pyramid was more than a tomb. It was a statement of divine ascent. Yet the true, smooth-sided pyramid we recognize today had not yet been born. That final crucial step in the evolutionary chain was taken by a single, obsessive pharaoh of the Fourth Dynasty, Sneferu, the father of the great Khufu. Sneferu was a relentless builder, and his reign was a grand, kingdom-wide experiment in pyramid construction. His first attempt at Madam began as a step pyramid, which he later tried to convert into a true pyramid by filling in the steps with a limestone casing. The project was a catastrophic failure. The outer shell collapsed, leaving the ruined core we see today. Undeterred, Sneferu moved to Dashur and began again. Here, he built the bent pyramid, an icon of architectural improvisation. He started at a daringly steep 54-degree angle, but signs of structural instability forced his builders to change the angle midway to a much safer 43 degrees, giving the pyramid its distinctive shape. It was a lesson learned in stone. Finally, with the knowledge gained from 2 colossal failures, Sneferu commissioned a third monument just a mile away, the Red Pyramid. Built from the start at the proven 43-degree angle, its reddish limestone core gave it its name. It was a triumph, the world's first successful, true, smooth-sided pyramid. Sneferu's relentless pursuit had perfected the design and the process, laying the essential foundation for his son's even greater ambition. Upon the foundation of his father's hard-won knowledge, Pharaoh Khufu ascended to the throne of a unified and prosperous Egypt. The Fourth Dynasty was the zenith of the Old Kingdom's power, a time when the pharaoh was not merely a ruler, but a god on earth, the living embodiment of Horus. His authority was absolute, his resources seemingly limitless, and his ambition was singular: to build not just a tomb, but an eternal engine of resurrection that would dwarf everything that had come before it and stand for all time. Khufu's project was not born of simple vanity. It was a profound act of theology. The pyramid was known as the Akhet Khufu, Khufu's horizon. It was a sacred point of transition, a man-made mountain from which the pharaoh's divine spirit, his Ba, would launch into the heavens to join the sun god Ra on his eternal journey across the sky in his solar bark. To achieve this, the structure had to be perfect. The Great Pyramid of Giza was a national project on an unprecedented scale, consuming the focus of the entire kingdom for 2 decades. It was a testament to the state's incredible power of organization and the pharaoh's central role in maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order. The design was a marvel of cosmic alignment. Its 4 sides were oriented to the cardinal points with an accuracy that modern technology struggles to replicate. Its internal passages and chambers, a complex network within the solid mass, were not random. The so-called air shafts emanating from the king's and queen's chambers were not for ventilation, but were precisely angled to point to specific stars and constellations, such as Orion and Ursa Minor, which held deep significance in Egyptian funerary beliefs. They were pathways for the soul. The king's chamber itself, built from colossal red granite blocks transported from Aswan 500 miles away, was designed to protect the royal sarcophagus for eternity. Above it, 5 stress-relieving chambers distributed the crushing weight of the millions of tons of stone above. Khufu's vision was to create a physical anchor for his eternal life, a monument so immense and so perfect that it would guarantee his rebirth among the gods and forever proclaim the divine power of the pharaoh. The success of a monument as colossal as the Great Pyramid depended as much on its location as its design. The site had to be geologically sound, strategically positioned, and spiritually significant. For Khufu's eternal ambition, only one place on Earth would suffice: the Giza Plateau. Geologically, Giza was perfect. It is a vast, elevated plate of solid limestone bedrock, a natural foundation strong enough to support the pyramid's estimated 6 million tons of weight without risk of subsidence or collapse. Building on sand or silt, common elsewhere along the Nile, would have been impossible. This solid base was the literal bedrock of the entire project. Strategically, the plateau was ideally situated. It stood on the west bank of the Nile, the traditional direction of the sunset, and, in Egyptian belief, the land of the dead. It was also just a few miles from Memphis, the bustling capital of the Old Kingdom. This proximity allowed for direct oversight from the royal court and streamlined the immense logistical challenge of supplying the project. The Nile itself was the project's lifeline. A complex of canals and a specially constructed harbor were engineered at the foot of the plateau, allowing barges to deliver materials from across the kingdom directly to the construction site. Massive granite blocks for the inner chambers were floated down from the southern quarries of Aswan. High-quality white Tura limestone for the gleaming outer casing was ferried from across the river, and food, tools, and other supplies for the tens of thousands of workers arrived daily. But Giza was more than just a practical choice. It was sacred ground. Its high, flat expanse offered a clear and commanding view of the eastern horizon, essential for the precise astronomical alignments that were integral to the pyramid's function as a celestial portal. The entire complex was laid out with the cosmos in mind, while theories like the Orion correlation, which posits that the three Giza pyramids mirror the stars in Orion's belt, remain a subject of academic debate. They speak to the undeniable link between the site's geography and the celestial ambitions of its builders. Giza was the perfect intersection of the earthly and the divine, a hallowed stage chosen to launch a pharaoh into eternity. While Pharaoh Khufu provided the divine will and the national resources, the monumental task of transforming that vision into a physical reality fell to one man, Hemiunu. He was the mastermind, the chief engineer, and the project manager of the largest construction endeavor in human history up to that point. His official title was vizier, the highest-ranking official in the entire kingdom, second only to the pharaoh himself. But Hemiunu was more than just a powerful administrator. He was a member of the royal family, believed to be Khufu's own nephew. This close blood tie ensured a level of trust and dedication essential for a project of such sacred importance. The scale of Hemiunu's responsibility is difficult to comprehend. He was the ultimate logistician, overseeing every facet of the operation. He coordinated the quarrying of millions of stone blocks, from the common limestone of the Giza Plateau to the precious granite of Aswan. He managed a complex supply chain that fed, housed, and equipped a city of tens of thousands of skilled workers, bakers, brewers, stonemasons, doctors, and scribes. This was no slave army, but a highly organized professional workforce, a fact attested to by the discovery of their extensive settlement near the pyramids. As the chief architect, Hemiunu's genius is evident in the pyramid's enduring precision. Under his direction, the 13-acre base was leveled to within less than an inch of perfect horizontality. He oversaw the surveyors who aligned the structure to the cardinal points with an accuracy of just a few arc minutes. He was responsible for the complex internal geometry of the passages and chambers, ensuring they were constructed with flawless execution. All of this was achieved using simple yet effective tools: plumb bobs, set squares, and copper instruments. The true measure of the man is not just in the pyramid he built for his king, but in the tomb he built for himself. His own large mastaba lies in the Western Cemetery at Giza, in the shadow of the Great Pyramid, a place of high honor. It was there that his magnificent, life-sized statue was discovered. It portrays a powerful, seated official, his features realistic and stern, not idealized. In this statue, we see the face of the man who organized chaos, mastered logistics, and engineered a mountain, the brilliant and formidable architect of eternity. The Great Pyramid of Giza is an icon of immense scale, but its true genius lies not just in its size, but in its staggering precision. Long before the invention of the compass, or modern surveying equipment, its builders oriented the structure to the four cardinal directions with an accuracy that is frankly breathtaking. The pyramid's sides deviate from true north by less than 3/60ths of a degree. This was not a fortunate accident. It was the result of a profound understanding of the heavens, a celestial blueprint made manifest in stone. How did they achieve such a feat? The leading theories suggest a mastery of naked-eye astronomy. One method involves tracking the path of a star as it rises and sets. By bisecting the angle between its rising and setting positions, one can find a true north-south line. The prime candidate for this was a star in the northern sky, Thuban, which at the time was the closest visible star to the celestial pole, our equivalent of Polaris. Another compelling theory is the solar shadow method, where builders would have tracked the shadow of a vertical pole, or gnomon, throughout the day. By marking the shadow's path, they could trace a perfect circle, and from it, derive an exact east-west line, and subsequently, a north-south one. But this alignment was far more than a technical challenge. It was an act of sacred cosmology. For the ancient Egyptians, the pyramid was a machine for resurrection, a launch pad for the pharaoh's soul, or Ba, to ascend into the afterlife. The destination was specific: the circumpolar stars in the northern sky, which they called the imperishables, because unlike other celestial bodies, they never set below the horizon. The architecture itself was a map to this eternity. The so-called air shafts within the pyramid were not for ventilation. The northern shaft of the king's chamber, for instance, pointed directly at Thuban, providing a direct path for the king's spirit. The southern shaft targeted the constellation we know as Orion's Belt, a celestial representation of the god Osiris, the ruler of the underworld. The pyramid was therefore a physical anchor for the cosmic order, a place where heaven and earth met, ensuring the king's divine journey and, by extension, the eternal stability of Egypt itself. To erect a monument like the Great Pyramid required more than advanced knowledge of astronomy and engineering. It demanded the mobilization of an entire nation. This was not merely a construction project. It was the central organizing principle of the old kingdom state, a logistical undertaking on a scale previously unimaginable. The sheer numbers are difficult to comprehend. Tens of thousands of laborers, masons, surveyors, toolmakers, and support staff were required. Feeding and housing this temporary army was a monumental task in itself. The fertile plains of the Nile Delta, the breadbasket of the ancient world, were put to work producing enormous surpluses of grain, which were then transported, stored in granaries, and baked into thousands of loaves of bread each day to fuel the workforce. Great herds of cattle were driven to the site to provide a steady supply of protein. This entire supply chain was managed by a highly organized and literate bureaucracy of scribes who tracked every resource, from rations and copper chisels to the number of stone blocks delivered. The workforce itself was not a mass of slaves laboring under the lash, but a structured, rotational system of conscripted Egyptian citizens. Graffiti left by the workers inside the pyramid reveals they were organized into teams and divisions, with names like the Drunkards of Menkaure or the Friends of Khufu Gang. These teams competed against each other, fostering a sense of camaraderie and pride in their sacred work. They were performing a form of national service, a labor tax known as a corvée. In return for their efforts during the months of the Nile's inundation, when farming was impossible, they were fed, housed, and cared for. At the apex of this complex pyramid of human effort stood the pharaoh, the god-king. The construction was the ultimate expression of his divine authority and his ability to command Ma'at, the fundamental concept of order, truth, and cosmic balance. By marshaling the resources of the entire country towards this single, colossal goal, the pharaoh centralized power, unified the two lands of Upper and Lower Egypt, and created an economic engine that would define his civilization for centuries. Every one of the 2.3 million blocks that form the Great Pyramid began its journey as a wound in the earth, a scar left by the hands of ancient quarrymen. The monument is a mosaic of stones sourced from different locations, each chosen for its specific properties and purpose. The bulk of the pyramid, its inner core, was hewn from the limestone bedrock of the Giza Plateau itself, a convenient and practical choice for the millions of tons of structural blocks. But for the parts of the pyramid that were meant to be seen, or to protect the king's chamber, the builders went to extraordinary lengths. Across the Nile from Giza lay the quarries of Tura. Here, deep underground, workers excavated a pristine, fine-grained white limestone. Unlike the rougher Giza stone, the Tura limestone was perfect for the pyramid's outer casing. Workers would tunnel into the cliffs, following the best seams of rock, and extract blocks that would later be polished to a brilliant, smooth finish. When completed, the Great Pyramid would have gleamed in the Egyptian sun like a giant jewel, its dazzling white surface visible for miles. Yet, for the most sacred inner sanctums, even Tura limestone was not enough. For this, the Egyptians traveled over 800 kilometers south to Aswan, the source of a famously hard and beautiful red granite. From these quarries came the colossal monoliths, some weighing over 70 tons, used to construct the walls and ceiling of the king's chamber and the massive sarcophagus that would hold the pharaoh's body. The technology used to extract these stones is a testament to their ingenuity. Without iron tools, they used dolerite, a stone harder than granite, to pound out channels around the desired block. They would then insert wooden wedges into cracks, soak them with water, and wait for the expanding wood to split the megalith from the bedrock. Transporting these giants was another epic challenge. The blocks were dragged on immense wooden sledges to the banks of the Nile, loaded onto specially constructed barges, and floated downstream during the annual inundation, when the high water allowed the boats to get closer to the construction site. It was a slow, perilous, and labor-intensive process, a testament to the immense value placed on these stones from the wounds of the earth. For millennia, the identity of the pyramid builders was shrouded in myth. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing 2,000 years after their construction, passed down stories of 100,000 slaves toiling in misery. This image, popularized by Hollywood epics, dominated our imagination for centuries. But in the late 1980s, a remarkable discovery just south of the Giza Plateau began to tell a different, far more compelling story. Here, archaeologists, led by Mark Lehner, uncovered the ruins of a vast, planned settlement, a lost city, now known as Hayt el Ghurab, or the Wall of the Crow. This was no slave camp. This was a highly organized urban center, the logistical heart of the pyramid construction. The city was divided into distinct districts. In one area, long gallery-like buildings served as barracks for a rotating workforce of thousands of conscripted laborers. These men would come from their villages for a period of service before returning home. To the south lay a more permanent settlement, with well-built houses for the administrators, scribes, and highly skilled craftsmen who formed the project's permanent staff. The most revealing finds, however, speak to the daily life and diet of these workers. Archaeologists unearthed massive bakeries with industrial-scale ovens capable of producing enough bread to feed tens of thousands. They found vast quantities of animal bones, showing that the workers were sustained by a protein-rich diet of beef, mutton, and fish. This was not the meager ration of a slave. It was the fuel for a valued and respected workforce. A nearby cemetery provided further evidence. The skeletons found there belonged to the pyramid builders, and they told a story of hard physical labor. Many showed signs of healed bones and fractures, indicating they received medical care. Some even showed evidence of successful, complex surgeries like amputations and brain operations. The builders of the pyramids were not slaves. They were skilled Egyptian workers, organized, well-fed, and cared for. They were participants in a national project of immense religious and cultural importance, building an eternal home for their god-king, and, in doing so, securing the prosperity and order of their entire world. Upon her marriage to Napoleon III, Eugénie de Montijo was not universally welcomed. To the old French aristocracy, she was a Spanish upstart. To the political establishment, she was a foreigner with questionable influence. She understood that her position, and indeed the legitimacy of the Second Empire itself, rested on a foundation that had yet to be built. Her first monumental task was to level the ground, to create a flawless base upon which the new dynasty could stand secure. The Tuileries Palace became her construction site. While her husband focused on the machinery of state, Eugénie focused on its soul. She began by engineering a court life so magnificent, so meticulously organized, that it would silence all criticism and dazzle the world. Every ball, every reception, every state dinner was a carefully placed stone in this new foundation. She understood that power was not merely wielded in council chambers. It was projected in ballrooms. Eugénie's most famous tool in this endeavor was fashion. She formed a legendary partnership with the designer Charles Frederick Worth, transforming Paris into the undisputed capital of global style. But this was not mere vanity. Her wardrobe was a political instrument, a way to promote French textiles and craftsmanship, making her very appearance an advertisement for the nation's economic prowess. Each gown was a statement of cultural supremacy. Beyond the glamour, she laid a deeper foundation through extensive charity work, founding orphanages, hospitals, and social welfare programs. This was a calculated effort to win the hearts of the common people, to show that the Empress was not just an icon of luxury, but a mother to the nation. She was creating a perfectly level, unshakable platform, clearing the uneven ground of skepticism and replacing it with a polished surface of cultural prestige, economic influence, and popular support. This flawless foundation was not the end point. It was the essential, perfectly engineered starting point from which she would soon begin to build upwards. With her foundation secure, Empress Eugénie began the arduous task of raising the giant blocks of her political ambitions. These were not stones of granite, but colossal issues of international policy and national destiny, each one requiring immense force and strategic leverage to move. The court she had perfected now became her workshop, the place where theories on how to hoist these immense weights were debated and refined. One of the first and heaviest blocks was the Suez Canal. The project, championed by her cousin Ferdinand de Lesseps, was dismissed by many as a folly. Yet, Eugénie saw its world-changing potential. She became its most powerful advocate, relentlessly lobbying her hesitant husband and his skeptical ministers, using her influence like a complex system of pulleys and counterweights to gradually lift the project from dream to reality. Her presence at its grand opening in 1869 was the triumphant culmination of this decade-long effort. Another giant block was her staunch ultramontanism, her unwavering support for the Pope's temporal power over the Papal States. This was a deeply personal conviction that she elevated to the level of French foreign policy. Against the tide of Italian unification and the advice of many in her husband's government, she fought fiercely to keep French troops in Rome, a political maneuver of immense weight and complexity. Her methods for raising these blocks varied. She was a master of informal influence, using private conversations, intimate dinners, and her correspondence to apply steady, upward pressure. She formed alliances within the government, identifying ministers who shared her views and empowering them. Her salon became a political arena where she could gauge support and dismantle opposition. Not all her efforts were successful. Her enthusiastic support for the disastrous Mexican adventure stands as a testament to the risks involved in moving such monumental weights. But her active, relentless engagement in the great issues of the day proves she was far more than a consort. She was a political engineer, constantly theorizing and striving to raise the pillars of her vision for France. There is no greater test of a political structure than the absence of its architect. For Empress Eugénie, this test came on 3 separate occasions when Napoleon III left the country, entrusting her with the full powers of regent. It was in these moments that she moved from the outer courts of influence into the very heart of the mountain, the symbolic king's chamber of absolute authority. This was not a ceremonial role. As regent, she was the state. She chaired the Council of Ministers, received foreign ambassadors, and held the final say on domestic and military policy. The intricate machinery of the French government was hers to command. The first regency in 1859, during the war in Italy, was her apprenticeship. She proved a quick study, handling affairs with a firmness that surprised many ministers accustomed to her charm. She learned the levers of power, the flow of information, and the art of decisive command. Her second regency in 1865 was a quieter affair, but further solidified her reputation as a capable and steady hand. However, it was her third and final regency in 1870, during the cataclysmic Franco-Prussian War, that represented the ultimate trial. With the emperor at the front, Eugénie was the sole sovereign in a Paris seething with anxiety and revolutionary fervor. From this isolated chamber at the heart of the government, she had to engineer a nation's survival. She corresponded directly with generals, debated strategy with the War Council, and attempted to rally a fracturing government. She resisted calls for the emperor's return, believing his presence was needed with the army, a decision that showed her immense fortitude, if perhaps not her political foresight. In this crucible, Eugénie demonstrated the extent of her political engineering. She was tough, decisive, and utterly dedicated to the preservation of the empire. She was no longer just a supporter or an influencer. She was the central pillar within the structure of power, the operator in the heart of the mountain, single-handedly holding the weight of an empire on the brink of collapse. Before the fall, there was the zenith. The late 1860s were the Second Empire's Grand Gallery, a magnificent, ascending corridor of opulence, innovation, and international prestige, and Empress Eugénie was its chief architect. This was the culmination of all her foundational work, a spectacular display designed to project an image of a new golden age for France, a stairway leading the Bonaparte dynasty to heavenly heights of legitimacy and glory. The crowning achievement of this era was the Exposition Universelle of 1867. Paris was transformed into the world stage, and Eugénie was its impresario. Kings, emperors, sultans, and czars made the pilgrimage to the French capital, not just to see technological marvels, but to be received by the Empress at the Tuileries. Each lavish ball, each state visit, was a masterclass in cultural diplomacy. Eugénie used the splendor of her court to foster alliances, smooth over political tensions, and cement France's position as the arbiter of culture and power in Europe. This Grand Gallery was not just an ephemeral collection of parties. It was built in iron and stone. Eugénie was a fervent supporter of Baron Haussmann's radical rebuilding of Paris. The new wide boulevards, grand opera houses, and manicured parks were the physical manifestation of the empire's self-image, modern, orderly, and magnificent. This new Paris was the permanent gallery showcasing the regime's success. As hostess of Europe, Eugénie curated an atmosphere of dazzling progress and unshakable confidence. The court's patronage of the arts, science, and fashion created a powerful sense of momentum, a feeling that France was on an unstoppable ascent. For a brilliant moment, the gallery seemed to stretch endlessly upwards, a stairway to a glorious future. It was a testament to Eugénie's vision that she could construct such a breathtaking spectacle of power. But like all such structures, this grand gallery was perilously fragile, its magnificent ascent leading not to the heavens, but to the precipice of a sudden and devastating collapse. By the mid-1860s, the glittering facade of the Second Empire concealed a labyrinth of political complexity, and at its heart was Empress Eugénie, a figure of immense, yet often inscrutable, influence. Like the hidden chambers of a great monument, her true power lay in sealed passages of communication and influence, far from the public court. One of the most significant and mysterious aspects of her reign was her unwavering ultramontanism, a fervent, conservative Catholicism that placed papal authority above all else. This created a fundamental ideological rift with her husband, whose political survival often depended on placating liberal and anti-clerical factions, particularly concerning the unification of Italy, which threatened the Pope's temporal power over the Papal States. Eugénie became the leader of the court's clerical party, a formidable faction that saw her as the last true defender of the faith. Her private apartments in the Tuileries Palace transformed into a nerve center for this cause. Here she held secret audiences with papal nuncios, conservative ministers, and Catholic grandees, bypassing official government channels. Her correspondence with Pope Pius IX was a star shaft, a direct line of communication aimed at a higher authority, through which she pledged her support and strategized to protect Rome. These actions raise profound and still debated questions. Was she a loyal wife, trying to save her husband's soul and his empire from godless radicalism? Or was she a shadow ruler, pursuing a personal agenda that ultimately undermined the emperor's delicate political balancing act? Historians still sift through her letters, searching for definitive proof of how far her influence extended. She acted as regent during Napoleon III's absences, but her true power was arguably greater when she was not officially in charge, operating through persuasion, emotional pressure, and the cultivation of a network loyal to her and her ideals. The empire's official policies were one thing. The whispers and strategies emanating from the Empress's chambers were another entirely, creating a dual-track system of governance whose contradictions would prove perilous. If the Second Empire was a grand pyramid built to project French power and prestige, Then the Exposition Universelle of 1867 was its golden capstone, the glittering benbenet placed at its apex for all the world to see. And the figure who polished this capstone and ensured it shone with blinding brilliance was Empress Eugénie. This was not merely a trade fair. It was the ultimate celebration of the Bonapartist project, a magnificent spectacle of industry, art, and imperial might, held in a Paris reborn under Baron Haussmann. For 6 months, the city became the capital of the world, and Eugénie was its supreme hostess. She was the living embodiment of the empire's glamour, elegance, and modernity. Every visiting monarch, from Tsar Alexander II of Russia to the Ottoman Sultan Abdulaziz, was received by her. Her state dinners at the Tuileries Palace were legendary. Her gowns by Charles Frederick Worth set global fashion trends, and her presence at every major event lent an air of almost divine grace to the proceedings. She understood, perhaps better than Napoleon III himself, that power was performance. The exposition was the grandest stage imaginable, and she played her part to perfection. She personally presided over the award ceremonies, toured the national pavilions with genuine curiosity, and charmed foreign dignitaries with her intelligence and multilingual fluency. This was the zenith. The political troubles, the distant rumblings of Prussian ambition, the failed Mexican adventure, all seemed to fade into insignificance amid the fireworks, the grand balls, and the technological marvels on display at the Champ de Mars. For a fleeting moment, the Second Empire appeared unassailable, a permanent fixture on the European landscape. Eugénie, at the center of it all, was more than just an empress. She was the high priestess of this cult of progress and luxury, the final, perfect piece that completed the monument and declared its glory to the heavens. It was a moment of supreme triumph, a dazzling illusion of permanence, just before the structure's foundations began to irrevocably crack. Like the Great Pyramid, which was originally covered in highly polished white limestone, the Second Empire presented a brilliant, seamless facade to the world. This gleaming exterior, which projected an image of unparalleled modernity, stability, and sophistication, was largely the creation of Empress Eugénie. She was the master architect of the regime's public image, understanding that perception was a powerful political tool. Her most visible contribution was in the realm of fashion and style. She was not merely a follower of trends, she was their source. Her patronage of the House of Worth transformed Paris into the undisputed capital of global fashion. The crinoline, the lavish fabrics, the exquisite jewels, these were the polished casing stones of her court. Each state ball, each public appearance, was a meticulously crafted display of wealth and taste, reported on with breathless excitement by newspapers across Europe and America. This was soft power in its most potent form. Yet, her influence went far beyond couture. Eugénie was a key supporter of Baron Haussmann's radical reconstruction of Paris. She championed the creation of wide boulevards, grand parks, and monumental buildings, not just for sanitation or military control, but because she understood that this new Paris was the ultimate symbol of the empire's power and permanence. It was a clean, orderly, and beautiful stage for the imperial drama. She furnished the newly renovated state apartments in a style that bore her name, a lavish revival of Louis XVI that connected the Bonaparte dynasty to the grandeur of the old monarchy. She hosted glittering Mondays at the Tuileries, where the era's leading artists writers, and scientists mingled with the aristocracy, creating a vibrant cultural scene that defined the age. This carefully polished surface, however, served to obscure the growing stresses within the imperial structure. While the world marveled at the gleaming white mountain, Eugénie's project was to ensure no one saw the internal faults, the political dissent, and the looming foreign threats that lay beneath. Every golden age has its twilight, and for the Second Empire, the shadows began to lengthen dramatically at the end of the 1860s. The gleaming monument Eugénie had helped build was about to be enclosed within a necropolis of its own making, and she, tragically, would help lay the first stones of its tomb. The catalyst was the growing power of Prussia under Otto von Bismarck, a threat that Napoleon III, now ailing and hesitant, seemed unable to decisively counter. As the emperor's health failed, Eugénie's political influence grew more pronounced and, fatefully, more hawkish. She saw compromise with Prussia as weakness and believed that only a victorious war could silence domestic opposition and secure the dynasty for her son, the Prince Imperial. She became the leading voice of the war party in the French court. The final crisis came in July 1870 with the dispute over the Spanish throne, a diplomatic trap skillfully laid by Bismarck. While the French government was close to a peaceful resolution, Eugénie and her allies pushed for more. They demanded not just a withdrawal of the Hohenzollern candidacy, but a permanent guarantee from the Prussian king, a demand designed to humiliate Prussia or provoke a conflict. When Bismarck published the deliberately inflammatory Ems Dispatch, public opinion in Paris erupted. In the crucial council meetings, Eugénie's arguments were decisive. Overruling the cautious prime minister, she passionately advocated for mobilization. According to some accounts, upon the declaration of war, she declared with triumphant certainty, "C'est ma guerre. This is my war." It was a catastrophic miscalculation. She envisioned a swift French victory, a glorious affair that would solidify the empire for a generation. Instead, she had initiated the Franco-Prussian War, a conflict that would become the burial ground of her husband's regime and the France she knew. The armies marching off to battle were, in effect, constructing a city for the dead, a vast necropolis on the fields of eastern France, where the Second Empire would be decisively and brutally entombed. In the autumn of 1869, Empress Eugénie embarked on a journey that would become the glittering apex of her reign, a final radiant spectacle before the darkness fell. She traveled to Egypt as the guest of honor for the inauguration of the Suez Canal, a project deeply connected to France and to her own family, through its architect, her cousin Ferdinand de Lesseps. But before the grand ceremony, she indulged a personal passion, sailing up the Nile aboard a luxurious steamer provided by the Khedive Ismail. This was a voyage into the very heart of antiquity, a pilgrimage to the land of the Pharaohs that had captivated European imagination for centuries. Guided by the famed French archaeologist Auguste Mariette, Eugénie explored the ruins of Karnak and Luxor, her modern entourage a stark contrast to the millennia-old stones. Her most profound experience, however, awaited her in the Valley of the Kings. Descending into the suffocating darkness of the royal tombs, lit only by the flickering light of torches, she came face to face with eternity. Here were the resting places of kings who had commanded empires when Europe was still a wilderness. She saw the vibrant hieroglyphs, the depictions of gods and goddesses, and the immense sarcophagi meant to preserve a ruler for all time. For Eugénie, a devout Catholic, it was a confrontation with a powerful and alien spirituality. Yet she was deeply moved. She understood the human desire for permanence, the desperate attempt to defy mortality. In these sealed chambers, she felt the immense weight of history. Unbeknownst to her, this journey was a metaphor for her own fate. Just as the ancient Egyptians had sealed their tombs, believing they were securing a future, the doors were about to be sealed on the Second French Empire. This trip was the final, elaborate ritual before its entombment. She was walking through the graves of a dead civilization, little knowing she would soon preside over the death of her own. As Empress Eugénie's steamer glided along the Nile, she witnessed a land of profound contradictions. This was the sleeping giant of Egypt, a nation stirring from a long slumber under the ambitious and ruthless hand of Khedive Ismail Pasha. On one side, there was the history that drew Eugénie and the world to its shores, a legacy of unparalleled grandeur, a reverence for a past so monumental it seemed almost divine. The pyramids, the Sphinx, and the temples of Thebes were testament to a civilization that had mastered engineering, art, and the very concept of eternity. This was the Egypt that Europeans revered, the subject of intense academic study and romantic fantasy. Eugénie, a product of this Egyptomania, was a pilgrim at its ancient altars. But alongside this reverence, she could not have missed the signs of ruin. The giant was stirring, but its awakening was painful. For centuries, its treasures had been plundered, its monuments left to decay, or be carried off piece by piece to museums in London, Paris, and Berlin. The reverence was often a possessive one. Furthermore, the Khedive's modernizing zeal came at a staggering cost. To fund the Suez Canal and create a new European-style Cairo to impress his guests, Ismail had plunged Egypt into catastrophic debt. He employed European advisors and engineers, but paid for it with the sweat of his people and the future of his country. Eugénie saw the new opera houses and palaces rising from the dust. But these were built upon a foundation of foreign loans and local exploitation that would soon lead to bankruptcy and British occupation. She was the celebrated guest of a spectacular but unsustainable dream. Her presence, and that of the other European royals, lent legitimacy to the Khedive's project. But it was the legitimacy of a predator, admiring its prey. The sleeping giant was being awakened not for its own benefit, but to serve the strategic and economic interests of the great powers of Europe, with France at the forefront. On November 17, 1869, the world's attention was fixed on Port Said. This was the day humanity would breach the gates between two worlds. After a decade of relentless toil, the Suez Canal was finally open, and Empress Eugénie was its undisputed star. She stood on the deck of the imperial yacht L'Aigle, leading a majestic procession of ships from across the globe into the newly forged waterway. It was a moment of supreme triumph for France, for modern engineering, and for Eugénie herself. The ceremony was a spectacle of unparalleled opulence. Cannons roared, music played, and dignitaries from every major power watched as the waters of the Mediterranean flowed towards the Red Sea. For Eugénie, this was the culmination of a French dream, a validation of her husband's imperial ambitions on the world stage. She was more than a spectator. She was the canal's godmother, the symbol of its success. Yet, beneath the pageantry lay a darker narrative, the story of a great robbery. The term breaching the gates was not just geographical, it was economic and political. The canal opened Egypt to unprecedented European influence. The great robbery was not of gold from a pharaoh's tomb, but of a nation's sovereignty. The project was financed by selling shares primarily to French investors, and by crippling loans that the Khedive could never repay. This debt became the justification for European intervention, culminating in British control of Egypt for decades to come. The canal, celebrated as a tool for global unity, became a chain around the nation's neck. There was also the immense human cost. Tens of thousands of Egyptian peasants, the Fellahin, were forced into labor under brutal conditions. An estimated 20,000 died digging the ditch that Eugénie now so gracefully sailed. Their lives were the invisible price of this marvel of progress. As Eugénie toasted the canal's success at lavish balls in Ismailia and Cairo, she was celebrating a monument built on a foundation of debt and death. It was the zenith of her power, a fleeting, glorious moment where she stood at the center of the world, unaware that the gates being breached would ultimately lead to the ruin of her host and the dawn of a new, more rapacious era of colonialism. Empress Eugénie's return to France was triumphant. The success of the Suez Canal inauguration echoed across Europe, and she brought back with her more than just memories. Her journey amplified the wave of Egyptomania sweeping the continent, leaving tangible echoes in the stone and style of the late Second Empire. The fascination with ancient Egypt, now more accessible than ever, permeated French culture. Furniture design began to incorporate sphinxes and lotus motifs. Jewelry mimicked the collars of pharaohs, and artists found new inspiration in the Nile's landscapes. Eugénie, as the era's ultimate trendsetter, helped popularize this style égyptien from the highest echelons of society downwards. Her patronage was not merely stylistic, it was scientific. Her support for archaeologists like Auguste Mariette lent imperial weight to the burgeoning field of Egyptology. The canal, a masterpiece of modern science and engineering, paradoxically served to unlock the secrets of the ancient world. It drastically cut travel time to Egypt, making it easier for scholars and excavators to conduct their work. The new Khedivial Opera House, for which Verdi's Aida was famously commissioned, became a symbol of this fusion, European art celebrating an Egyptian theme, made possible by modern technology and wealth. The echoes in stone were thus twofold: the ancient echoes from the tombs and temples, and the new ones being carved by French engineers and scholars. Eugénie stood at the intersection of these two worlds, a modern monarch mesmerized by ancient power, championing the science that sought to understand it. Yet the most profound echo was one of tragic irony. This grand international achievement, this moment of ultimate prestige for Napoleon III and Eugénie, was to be their last. Within a year, the Franco-Prussian War would shatter their empire. The empress who had floated like a queen on the Nile would flee Paris as a refugee. The power and permanence she had admired in the pharaohs' tombs proved just as illusory for her own dynasty. The echoes of her Egyptian journey were soon drowned out by the cannons of Sedan, a faint, exotic melody from a world that had already vanished.